course includes an extensive unit on the climate change and requires on the student to read the Stern reviews on the economics of climate change, uh, which were published last year. The course delves into the science behind the issue, the challenges it poses to business, government, as well as a discussion on possible solution. Possible for extensive unit, expensive unit requires student. The course includes an intensive unit on climate change and requires all students to read the Stern Review on the Economics of Climate Change, which were published last year. The course delves into the science behind the issue, the challenges it poses to the business and government, as well as a discussion on possible solutions. In the fast-changing world of modern healthcare, the job of a doctor is more and more like a job of a chief executive. The people who run hospitals and physician practices don't just need to know medicine, they must know available to balance the budgets, motivate a large and diverse staff, and make difficult marketing and legal decisions. Physician practices. Physician practices. In the fast-changing world of modern healthcare, the job of a doctor is more like the job of the chief executive. The people who run hospitals and physicians practices don't just need to know medicine, they must also be able to balance budgets, motivate a large and diverse staff, and make difficult marketing and legal decisions. Environmental problems cause hard rock mining involve water pollution by metal themselves, chemicals used in processing, acid drainage, and sediment metal-like elements in other toxic and frozen coal trouble by ending nearly stream and water tables as a result of mining operations. Environmental problems caused by the hard rock mining involve water pollution by metals themselves, chemicals used in the processing, acid drainage, and sediment. Metals and metal-like elements in the earth are toxic and prone to cause trouble by ending up in the nearly streams and water tables as a result of mining operations. In the recent years, there have been one or two significant happenings that have kept alive the hope that the sea, deep sea, deep sea Mid-Consumer trend link with the past. In the December 1938 of the southeast tip of Africa, an amazing fish was caught alive. A fish was supposed to have been dead at least 60 million years. In recent years, there have been one of the two significant happenings that have kept alive the hope of that the deep sea Mid-Consumer trend links with the past. In the December 1938 of the southeast tip of Africa, an amazing fish was caught alive. A fish that's supposed to have been dead for at least 60 million years. In multilingual countries called mixing, the use of more than one variety in the same utterance, utterance or sentence code switching, the use of different languages and variety between sentences in the common and natural. Despite its frequency, or perhaps because of it, some scholars and self-appointed guardians of linguistic morality will both cause missing and soul switching inside linguistic efficiency. In multilingual countries, co-mixing the use of more than one variety in the same utterance and sentence and code switching. The use of different languages of varieties between sentences in the common and natural. Despite its frequency, or perhaps because of it. Some scholars and self-appointed guardians and linguistic morality view both co-mixing and co-switching as a sign of linguistic deficiency. In this landmark account, first published over 20 years ago, the author argues that the ignorance and lethargy in the poor and direct result of their whole situation of economic, social, and political domination by being kept in the situation and with critical awareness and respond to particularly impossible the disadvantages are kept submerged legal thing. In this landmark account, first published over 20 years ago, the author argues that the ignorance and lethargy of poor are the direct result of the whole situation of economic, social, and political domination. By being kept in the situation in which critical awareness and response are practically impossible, the disadvantages are kept submerged.
Students must observe lab safety regulations at all times.
Students must observe lab situation at all times.
It's the words of common occurrence that have different referential value.
Its current have different referential values.
The office said Dr. Smith will arrive later today.
The office said Dr. Smith will arrive later today.
Student Services provides help with housing and transport.
Student Services providing help with housing and transport.
A study skills seminar is on for students who require assistance.
The study skills seminar requires assistance and the student require amusement.
Any textual references you make should be cited appropriately in the footnotes.
It is important to check all your references will be cited in the footnote.
The research paper should begin with a thorough review of the literature.
The research should begin with the author's review of literatures.
The aesthetic implications of this study have not yet been fully explored.
The exploration of this study has not fully supported.
The inherent tension between these two features remains to be addressed.
This main tension between two pictures are remaining to be addressed.
Journalism is the collection and publication or transmission of news.
Journalism is the publication and domestication of transmission of news. Large cities worldwide, millions there, Sao Paulo, Mexico, Tokyo, Mumbai, Bombay. The picture talking about large cities worldwide in the Midlands between 1950 to 2015. It provides information on different categories such as London, Tokyo, New York, Sao Paulo, and Mexico City. As can be seen from the picture, Tokyo contributed the maximum we can be seen at 23 in 2000. On the other hand, Tokyo and Mumbai contribute a minimum we can be seen at 34 in 2015. After analyzing the picture, we can conclude that the picture showing crucial information, strongly supporting by important facts and figures having great impacts on New York, Tokyo, London, kilocalories per day. North America, Europe, Central Asia, World Africa. Holy shit. The picture mentions about the North America, Europe, and Central Asia. It provides information on different categories such as World Africa from 1975 to 1995. As can be seen from pictures, 1980 contribute the maximum we can be seen about 2,300. On the other hand, 1995 contribute a minimum we can be seen at 2,600. After analyzing the picture, we can conclude that the picture is showing crucial information strongly supported by important facts and figures having great impact on world, Europe, and Central Asia and North America. Injury location, schools, childcare, roads, work, home, leisure, sport, 19.1%, 17 at 17, 19.5, 19.82% injury location. The picture mentions about the injury location in many aspects. It provides information on different categories such as home, work, roads, others. It can be seen from the picture. Leisure sport contribute a maximum we can be seen at 70.1%. On the other hand, school and childcare contribute a minimum we can be seen at 4.8%. After analyzing the pictures, we can conclude that the picture is showing crucial information strongly supported by important facts and figures having great impact on home with 41.4%, others with more than 2%, and roads with 19.5%. And I think it's very important picture. Population growth projected population of Sydney. Census 1976. Population 6 million, 5,300,000. The picture is showing information about population growth and projected population of Sydney from 1976 to 2031. As can be seen in the picture, we can see that 1976 contribute the minimum we can be seen at 3,050,000 people. On the other hand, in 2031 projected, the population will reach to 5,003,000 people. And this is a very important picture with clear fact and figure having great impact on 3 million, 4 million, and 5 million from 1976 to 2031. What the Taipei Petronas Towers, Sear Tower, Chicago, skyscraper building. The picture showing the 3 top skyscraper building in the world. The first proper is about Taipei 2101, the second is Petronas Tower 1 and 2, and the last one is Sear Tower in Chicago. As can be seen from the picture, Kuala Lumpur Tower contribute the maximum we can be seen at 1,485 feet. On the other hand, Taipei Tower contribute the minimum we can be seen at 1,670 feet. After analyzing the picture, we can conclude that the picture is showing crucial information strongly supported by important facts and figures having great impact on Sear Tower, Chicago, 1,450 feet. Manufacturing output in UK, manufacturing output in UK, manufacturing output in UK, percentage, 100%, 100%, year. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The picture mentions about manufacturing output in UK. It also provides information on different categories from 1999 to 2007, got 2003 to 2005. As can be seen on picture, 2001 contribute the maximum we can be seen at 1004%. On the other hand, 2006 contribute the minimum with it around 96%. After analyzing the picture, we can conclude that the picture showing crucial information, strongly supported by important facts and figures having great impact on 2001, 2002, and percentage for around 98%, 1.2%.
Melk is not typical of all monasteries for many reasons. First, it is very grand, which most, especially later foundations, aren't. Secondly, it was founded in the countryside, whereas in the 17th and 18th centuries, a good proportion of foundations were made in towns. Thirdly, it still owns a substantial amount of land, because fourthly, it lies in the Austrian Republic, the only European country where grand old monasteries have been in continuous existence since they were founded, 900, 1,000, even in one case 1,200 years ago.
The picture mentioned about the land of Austria, the name named Mel Monastery. It's also mentioned about the country from 19th century and got a big foundation. And then it became the public in 1999 and it's continued to be expanded in 12,000 years later. And then it's moved. The lecture mentioned about another country with 19 mountain and lion. And then it's a very important information supported by important fact and figure having great impact on Mel Monastery and Austria.
Corruption comes at a huge economic and social cost, and that cost is felt most acutely by the world's poor. Dr. Arnold has already given the staggering figure of $1 trillion US that's paid in bribes worldwide. It is an extraordinary figure. It's a figure that equals 10 times what is paid each year by donors in international development assistance. 10 times development assistance. And even this huge amount, $1 trillion, could be an underestimate because it's very difficult to capture a number of the more elusive transactions within the public sector that involve corrupt dealings, such as budget leakages and asset theft. Corruption sharpens income inequality and it impacts disproportionately on the poor. In many countries, corruption works as a regressive tax on household incomes. Regressive because it impacts much more on the poor than the more wealthy. Compared with higher income groups, lower income families pay a much larger share of their incomes in bribes to access basic public services, and their overall access to those services is reduced.
The pictures mentioned about the financial flow between corruption and the development age, and it told that the country economy cost more than the poor country, and the doctor said about $1 trillion US it will spend worldwide. This thing was more 10 times larger than last year. International development assistance is got a huge amount, and then the assets, but with a transaction budget, it has been crazy increase between the high income level to low income level. Another thing is about public services and aggressive tax will have a heavy impact on people.
This is Hans Krebs, who in 1937 published a paper showing the sequence of chemical reactions by which energy is released in individual cells. It's called the Krebs cycle, which some of you may remember from your chemistry course in high school. Krebs is a wonderful example to me of how a scientist who is determined can overcome all kinds of human obstacles. Krebs' father constantly discouraged him and told him that he had just mediocre intelligence and would never do anything important in his life as a teenager. What Krebs remembers In his memoir, his father said to him, "You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear." And later on, when Krebs studied with the great biochemist Otto Warburg, Warburg also told him the same thing, not the same quotes, but that he had only mediocre ability and would never be a great scientist. And we all hear about how important it is for parents to encourage their children, but sometimes the children will go on to do great things no matter what we say to them.
The lecturer mentioned about Hans Krebs at the peak of his career. He was born in 1937 and he tried to be a chemical thing. And a lot of things related to in high school with the chemistry and the cycle and cell. But he overcomes a lot of human obstacle and he become the intelligent person. The important is his fathers give him a good coach with help him to become a better ear. Starting with Warburg also help him and he give him some codes, and then it's moved to like parents should encourage children.
To which of our senses do all of the following words relate? Opaque, vivid, brilliant, shiny.
Vivid. Vivid.
In a recession, does economic activity increase, slow down, or stay the same?
Slow down.
In medical terms, are antibodies harmful or beneficial for patients?
Beneficial.
Would a person suffering problems with their vision consult a biologist or an optometrist?
Optometrist.
Would fresh milk last longer in a fridge or in a cool cupboard?
In the fridge.
Historians use evidence to draw conclusions about the past. Would a contemporary artist's painting of an ancient battle be an original source or a secondary source?
Secondary source.
What is the subject of study at a culinary institute?
Psychology.
Where would you expect to find equipment like microscopes, Bunsen burners, beakers, and petri dishes?
Laboratories.
What is the name of the field of study that studies the human mind and behavior?
Psychology.
A planet or galaxy that is very distant can be seen with what device?
Telescope. countdown 10 phút rồi ta. Addition. Focus on Venus. San Francisco had a little chance of ever visiting the small San Francisco was survived by the coffee ringer. Nicaragua. thousands of goods were certified with the market trace and the premium producer market trace. Patrick concept, and to support the colonization, largely some item and aircraft were considered and the coordinate system. Do what the hell? You have 20 minutes to plan, write and revise an essay with this responsible interest in developing position violent portray TV and movie lead to increase the crime in society. People who watch the violent movie are more likely to become criminal to get the people to. Đúng là instant. Society đúng không? Society, yeah, society. again, up again, again up. Grease in gram. My concern. Influence. Holy shit, nằm viết thêm một bài nữa. Hôm nay biết thấy copy mãi rồi. Holy crap. Reading. Oh my god. Visit the theater of the beginning. Read the text and then what the following writer say royal visit the Jew of the coast. money, obscurity law made it difficult to costly to private employer and fire anyone. Labor union try to ensure this insubordination international reputable to protect the United States. With the following view to childhood can be ascribed to Stephen Osman. Childhood can be ascribed to Stephen Osman. Wait, what the hell is Stephen Osman? Cherish of the offering. Saint Infant Durado. With following we learn about Seawick work for London. You got a number of cholera epidemic. xem vào the letter. Nó chỉ có này thôi. The common understanding of the genius. The common understanding of the genius could be so what? Không được. Enchanted market. Exactly, điều hai nơi này ngược không biết là đúng mà. Picture a mark, thinking a mark. Wrong mark, nghe hợp lý ha. Cái bà mẹ đó. Establishing the key individual propensity that's influenced by their experience that of other. The key possibility of the perception divided by personality. Possible the this balance may be reason of reflection. Type of reflection. One in it. Đây. One up there. In it. Now in it fossil. In it first. One that they were remarkably consistent. Parallelly có này, không sai được này. Consistent, consistent. In very important scientific knowledge in society led to a surprising cũng đúng mà valid just surprising quá. In order to be ed realize perceive realize the sound, record thì có phải AD backup ở sao? Wiki claim. Đúng rồi, này realize correct random to be corresponding. AD You have been assuming không có. For a long time I have assumed that now we just had been accused. Good argue yet I have been arguing. Của mày á. Have been were arranging into that phải số nhiều. Again, increasing water. Medipath, we will lose the word again. Rising water. Continue water. Rising. The sea level. Indication, not true. Indication, maybe indication. Under a recharged land under threat of intimidate. Cái nào cũng đúng cả. Under in danger, không có cái này. Warning. Danger, threat of intimidation. So now we will more accessible. Nét phát đây này. My methodological stock in the past year have often in the incomparable change to catch up the biology. If you to get in my methodological inventory. Repertoire ini nih. And then now that I realize that the level of the north imagine function. Rồi, spoken text.
What is talent? Well, that's a very good question. It's actually a very difficult question to answer. People in the business of writing about this tend to define talent in very different ways. Some define it in a very restricted way to apply only to the people at the very top of the distribution curve, the sort of alphas, the top-rate minds. Some completely in the other direction define it to mean almost anybody in the workforce. It's a synonym for workers, and I think the first is clearly much too restrictive. The second is so broad as to be completely meaningless. I think it does depend on context, you know. If you're in a management consultancy firm, then talent really does mean, you know, high-level analytical ability. If you're in Southwest Airlines, then talent means the ability to be personable and pleasant and crack a few jokes quite often and keep the passengers happy. But more broadly, I think I use the term talent to mean brain power. And I use the term talent worker to mean something like Peter Drucker's knowledge workers, not exclusively, but in general. I think the talent that really matters in the modern economy is the talent to use one's brain, both for analytic and creative purposes.
Talent. Chém gió nhiều quá rồi, chết rồi. management consulting, management,
Okay, to understand what vitamin D does, we need to understand a central concept. The function of vitamin D is to maintain blood calcium. You probably think that the function of vitamin D is to maintain strong bones and teeth, but it does that by accident. Its real function is to maintain your blood calcium level in a very narrow range. And the reason for that is if your blood calcium level falls below about 9 milligrams per 100 millilitres, then you're going to get into big trouble and die rather quickly. And that's because blood calcium is important for muscle contraction and nerve transmission. And if you don't have enough of it, you can't contract muscles normally. There can't be normal nerve impulses, and this results in a disease called tetany, where you get these uncontrolled convulsions followed by rapid death. Calcium is also important for enzyme activity and blood clotting.
Calcium bị đúng rồi. Range in very narrow range. Thần tinh biết sao à? Nerve. Nerves.
So let us begin by addressing the question of inactivity and obesity in children and youth. It's clear that in children and youth, more and more of them are, by this definition of excess body weight, and we're seeing the prevalence go up. And not only in children and youth, but actually in infants, in tiny babies. 6 to 23 months. Look how over the last 20 or 30 years the obesity rate has increased. Now there's a whole host of issues about how do you define obesity in children, let alone in babies, but we'll not go into that this evening. You look at slightly younger kids, it's the same pattern. And then the 6 to 11-year-olds and even the older children. I mean, this is a phenomenon observed widely around the world, and from babies to children to youth and adults. All you have to do is, if you've traveled to the United States, say a couple of times in the last 20 years, it's very clear that there's an obesity epidemic there. And we're not quite number one. We're way ahead of you folks. You need to try to catch up and have the obesity rate move up a bit.
Well, the works of Shakespeare have been re-edited about once every 20 years since his own lifetime. That's partly just because as times change, the kind of information we need changes. So, for instance, a generation ago, readers could be expected to understand the allusions to classical mythology in Shakespeare. Now, most kids don't have a classical training, so we need explanatory notes for that. So there is part of the process is simply just sort of polishing things up and keeping the plays up to date. I also was very keen to take this project on because there simply was no edition out there that I thought was satisfactory. Quite often students or parents of prospective students would say to me, OK, which is the edition of the complete works to buy? And I really couldn't put my hand on my heart and say, this is a satisfactory edition. One reason for that is simply the sort of technical reason that nearly all editions are printed in double column, which is terribly hard to read. And most complete works editions don't actually have the explanatory notes on the page. So there were sort of practical things.
Some years ago, Bjorn Lomborg, a young Danish statistician, published a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist. It became a bestseller and generated a lot of heat. Lomborg was attacked, abused and accused of all manner of things, not because he denied the fact of global warming, in fact he affirmed it, but because on his analysis the devil, and he says a lot of deviousness, was contained in the details presented concerning the size of the problem and what were the most responsible steps to take in response to global warming.
Consciousness. CS. Yes.
I think that's not going to be such a viable option for Cerberus, but that may be the way that they're going to approach it. Private equity, of course, is supposed to have the advantage of taking management out of the spotlight of quarterly profits and industry analysts and prying shareholder eyes, and that hypothetically gives them a chance to take slower, more patient routes to doing something to turn a company around. I would hope, and I have some, I guess, optimism that some of the Cerberus team will have some creativity and imagination.
Optimism.
There's another thing that's unique about positive psychology as a field of study. Again, it started in 1998. You see, until very recently, the realm of life flourishing, of enhancing the quality of our lives, has been dominated by pop psychology. Now you go to the bookstore and the self-help section, huge, expanding literally by the second. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of books on the topic. You open these books and what you see, very interesting, charismatic writers, good writers, but often, not always, but often very little substance. Then you go to academia. You enter a library, you open the academic journals. What you see there, a lot of rigor, strong empirical foundation, science. But on the other hand, not accessible. Most people don't read academic journals. What positive psychology does is create a bridge between the ivory tower and Main Street, bringing the rigor, the empirical foundation, linking it to the accessibility, making it accessible to students in college, to the general public.
The neurons in the brain cells, are like electrical cables, and they've got a layer of insulation like the rubber or plastic around electrical cables. It's a layer of fat called myelin that enables the nerves to transmit impulses properly. What the petrol does, it's fat-soluble, and it just dissolves that insulation layer. So basically there's no sort of protection around the neurons, and slowly the neurons themselves shrink as well. And it makes you feel good, makes you emotionally feel better, strong, tough, smart. So the messages can't get around the brain and the body so well anymore. But the damage seems to follow a process. The thinking, the executive function, the more complex thinking is affected first, then the memory and the learning, and eventually the movement centers of the brain are affected. And that's when there's more serious impairment and probably less chance of recovery.
And one of the major lessons that we've learned is that diversity masks unity. And what I mean by that is that we are so attuned to noticing differences between things, and even differences between people, for example, because it's a tremendous survival advantage for us to recognize a lot of different people and know which ones are our friends and which ones are likely to stab us in the back. It really, really allows you to human beings to prosper. But that keen awareness of diversity actually masks some extraordinary, remarkable unifying principles in living organisms.
There are places on the moon near the poles where the sun never gets very high. It just sort of rolls around the horizon, and if the crater rims are tall enough, which is the case for already known craters, the sun never reaches the bottom of the crater. So it becomes what we call a water trap, where comets that might have impacted the moon and the like, water molecules can just fall into that and never get warm enough to evaporate out. And so as dry as the moon is, it may have substantial amounts of water trapped at the bottom of these craters. One interesting invention might be some device that reaches down into the soil, scoops it up, and sucks the water molecules out of it and drips it into a cup. And at the other end, you separate the hydrogen from the oxygen. That gives you rocket fuel. So the same machine that gives you the cup of water gives you rocket fuel on the other side. That's kind of an interesting device, if someone could invent that, because then you take it to the Sahara and extract water out of the sands of the Sahara. I mean, imagine the kinds of things you can do with the technology that enables this.
Winston Churchill was 65 years old when he became Prime Minister in 1940, at a most critical time in English history. He was 80 when he resigned after his second period of premiership. Many other leaders, including presidents of the United States and dictators such as Stalin, have been leaders in their late 60s and 70s. This is particularly significant given that most of them suffered from serious illnesses. Even now, many politicians at both central and local level continue in office well into old age. There are other leadership areas where older people continue into older age. For example, in academic life, where writers and lecturers continue to act as intellectual leaders well into their 90s. In industry too, some leaders show
So often when we say the word activist, it creates this little box in our mind that certain people can fit in and other people cannot. And one of my experiences, or I guess one of my lessons from the various experiences I've had over the last few years, has been that every choice we make has an impact on the world, including when we choose not to do something. And because of that, then, if you look at it, we don't oftentimes see the results of our choices right away, and so we think that it might or might not make a difference. Like, what does this one choice really mean in the grand scheme of things? But because no choice happens in a vacuum, every choice has impact. And because of that, then truly we are all activists, because every choice we're making is creating.
Well, there's a positive obligation on the bank to ensure that the people who are signing a loan guarantee know what they're doing. Loan guarantees are kind of unique in that someone is giving security or a guarantee and placing themselves at risk for someone else, and they receive nothing material in return. So you've got to ask yourself, why is this person doing this? Do they know what they're doing? They're risking a lot and not really getting anything back for it. So the imperative is that the bank must ensure that these people know what they're doing and that they fully understand the implications of what they're doing, and they know that their properties may be sold if another person doesn't meet their obligations.
For some people, this proposition may seem far-fetched, but ending poverty is both morally necessary and actually feasible. All of us must play a role in making it happen. All human beings want and have a right to live in dignity, to determine our own destinies, and to be respected by other people. Despite the universality of these rights, our capacities to fulfill them vary enormously. And no dividing line is more profound in influencing the quality of our lives than the gulf between poverty and prosperity.
It's in financial companies' interest to have people save more money.
It's in. 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 Financial interest to help is in financial company interest. Company interest to help people save more money to company. Financial company. Financial company interest of financial company.
Further research should establish whether this trend is significant. Further research is established. Further research or establish whether the trend is significant.
A gradual increase occurred between October and December.
Between November and December, between November and December, October, November, October, radio increase. Greater increase occurred between October and December. On video for soon in the deck.